virtually any standard protocol can be created through sort of a visual interface box, which I'll demonstrate later, by populating these required parameter boxes. And as you can see, the visual editor has a number of template buttons for standard protocols such as twitch, tetanus, eccentric force measurement, force frequency, injury, fatigue protocols. You also may create any sort of custom experiments. There's no limit to the functionality that existed in previous versions of DMC. Any sort of something that doesn't fit into that template can still be created. You can also import any old DMC back to the beginning of version 5. You can import any old protocols and sequence files. So these can all still be read by the existing version of DMC. So if you have a library of experiments that you've written, and to get started quickly, you don't want to go through the visual experiment editor, you can import all these old files. Okay, so I've opened up the select experiment type window, which is what I've sort of referred to as the visual experiment editor. And you can see that as we saw before, I have these sort of quickie little functions or buttons to create any new experiments, act as a wizard. And I don't have any pre-written experimental protocols here in this list. So we'll start by creating a few common ones from scratch. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a twitch here, and I have to give each experiment its own unique name. So we'll call this, twitch is generally pretty generic, so we'll call it perhaps twitch _dx. And these parameters by default are all right. They're sort of in the nominally acceptable range. So let's create this twitch. And you can see that it now populates in this list for me. So I'll go back to the add experiment window, and I can see that I've got this twitch protocol in my list to use for future if I want, and I'll continue to add some others that we may want to use. Well, we certainly want to do a force frequency experiment, which is sort of the standard standard protocol for finding the maximal amount of force. So let's call this X as well. And I've got a nice list here of the stimulation frequencies that I want to use in this particular experimental protocol. So there's sort of no more putting everything together. All the pertinent information about the experimental protocol that I need to give to the software is all here on this left sidebar in any of these wizards. So I'm going to sort of create a very standard force frequency. I'll remove some of these frequencies, for instance, and I may add some others here, which we might commonly find. A couple others. And so that's very nice. Now, I need to enter, for instance, how long I want each contraction to last. I can do so here. for this particular muscle, I'm going to set this as my stimulation duration, and I'm going to allow a minute between each contraction. Now, what I can do is, if I perhaps require different parameters for a different muscle type, I've added, as you'll recall, different muscles to this study. I can simply pick whichever one I want from the drop-down list, and then edit these parameters before creating the experiment, and that will then be reflected when I run the actual study, and I'm prompted to toggle between different muscles. So let's create that. And I see that both of these experimental protocols now appear in my study. And at this point, I would be ready, after using this visual experiment editor, to create the study. Very quickly, one more thing I'll just show you for the benefit of users who have experience with the previous version of DMC, is this custom experiment window. So I'll be prompted, for instance, to say something about a custom experiment, and let's just call it custom contraction for now. And you can see that we come to this sort of familiar looking sequence editor window or protocol editor window, which appeared in DMC5, wherefrom we can import or edit old files. So with the study created, with the experimental protocols created, I'll now click on the Create Study button, and this will begin to sort of lock this all in. And at this point, anything about the study will not be able to be edited.